I just want to introduce my friend and colleague, Navin Kumar, who I've known since he was a medical student long ago, but is now one of our real core educators and faculty members, serves as the assistant clerkship director in the medicine clerkship here at the Brigham, has been a co-director of the practice of medicine course and many other educational initiatives. And many months ago, I had asked him if he would be willing to really speak to us on just how to get involved as a medical educator and use his experience and thoughts. And then the pandemic hit and things slowed down, and we finally got a chance to reboot all of this. And so with a real thanks, Navin, for putting this together, I'll turn it over to you and very excited to hear the talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric. Very excited to see all the great educators here today. And this has been a really fun talk to put together. I mean, it's very much influenced by my own career path. And I think there's lessons learned that I'd love to share with you all today. I have no disclosures to report. And I just want to go over our plan. So we're going to try to keep this case-based. Whenever I teach, I tend to teach in a case-based format. I find it keeps it interactive, keeps us grounded. So we'll do a case and we'll walk through this case through the next 40 minutes or so. And my strategy here is to focus on strategies. So we're going to outline 7 different strategies together. And I've tried to do this taking strategies from what's relevant for a student all the way to a faculty member for 2 reasons. One is I know we have some students in the audience today, so I want to keep this relevant for you all as well as the residents and fellows. And then the second piece is, as a faculty member, I find that I have a lot of trainees who come to me asking, how did I get involved in medical education? So I find that it's relevant for faculty to understand what are all the various opportunities at each stage of the career, so that you can really mentor your young trainees interested in medical education with all the information that will help them on their way. So we're going to do a timeline. We're going to try to focus on all stages of learners and educators. And then, as Eric mentioned, I would love audience input. So after each strategy, while I'm talking, feel free to put a comment in the chat box. Christina DeZara is going to monitor that chat box, and we'll call on you to share. I think when these sessions work so well is when we take advantage of all the knowledge that's within the group. So please share, and if you feel comfortable, we will call on you, and we will still make sure to be done on time, okay? All right, so let's get started. So here we go. Here's the case. It's a 26-year-old male. He's a very deep affection for Wisconsin sports teams, and he presents during his 4th year of medical school with an interest in medical education. So there he is. This is 12 years ago, and I will we'll see how the pictures evolve over time. Okay. So my first tip is to start early and often. When I was a 4th year medical student, it was about around that time where I realized that I was going to be interested in medical education. I wanted to get some experience. So my approach back then was to serve as a student tutor in the Patient Doctor 2 course. This was the prior version of the clinical skills course at HMS that focused on the history and physical, how to do an oral presentation, kind of getting the 2nd year students ready to start their clinical work on the wards. And having known that I enjoyed education, it was something that I envisioned myself doing. I wanted to get tangible experiences in a role like that. I think for every educator, every step of the way, you question how much do you really have to offer. And I think it was that first experience as a 4th year tutor where I realized, even though I was still a student, there was a much I had to offer to a 2nd year student who was early in their career. So that was my approach. As a student, I wanted to gain some experience and learn about medical education. Today, I would say the opportunities are even more so for students here at HMS. And I'm sure this applies broadly outside of our institution as well. But speaking specifically about HMS, students can serve as medical education representatives. This is where students will represent their students at various medical education leadership groups, whether it's in the pre-clerkship curriculum or the clerkship curriculum, essentially voicing the concerns of their student body, as well as things that are working well, and have a voice at the table to actually influence curriculum. It's a really great way for students to to take on a formal role in medical education and at the same time influence the curriculum that they are actually receiving themselves. So I think being a medical education representative is one way here at HMS. The other I want to mention is the ELO 700 course. This is led by two great educators, Drs. Andrea Schwartz and Jeremy Richards. It's called the Medical Education Longitudinal Elective. And what it does, it's a longitudinal course, so it lasts over a year for third and fourth year students. And it's principally designed to develop the teaching skills of HMS students. And one piece that I like a lot about this course is that it also involves direct teaching. So there's an expectation that the students will teach for 20 hours over the course of the year, entitled the Teaching Field Experience, and get direct observation of their teaching skills during that time. So a wonderful way to get actual classroom-based teaching under the belt as a young educator. I think one course where this works really well is the Practice of Medicine course, which is the first year clinical skills course for the pathway students at HMS. Great way to get experience precepting, whether that's in a small group or at the bedside, and also have a faculty member who's observing your teaching skills so you can get direct feedback. So ELO 700 course is a great way for students to get both in classroom-based teaching about medical education, but also real field experience teaching. The other one is a bit more of a broader concept, and that's innovating within the HMS curriculum. And this can apply to anyone. It does not have to happen within a course, not as a medical education representative, but it's essentially using your own experience as a student to help evolve the curriculum. So I want to give you an example of a student who did this and did a fabulous job of it last year. So Parisa was a third-year student. She was a PCE student at the Brigham, did a phenomenal job during her PCE year, then came to me as well as to Dr. Alexander, Dr. Osmond with this idea to innovate. And so she did, now looking back on it, she did it in a wonderful way that I want to outline. So the first thing she did, it's actually two things, is she found the gap. So she found within the PCE year that she felt that there could be more global health curriculum brought into that year. And then she did a needs assessment where she actually surveyed the entire HMS student body on global health interest and exposure. And this was in conjunction with finding mentors, as I mentioned, working under me primarily, but also Drs. Alexander and Osmond, and essentially building a case for why there needs to be a curricular change. She then met with educational leadership, and she presented her idea to the course directors of PCE. And when I say present, she didn't just come informally and have some notes. She came with a slide set with data, and it was very impressive. The formal way in which she examined this curricular gap in the PCE year and how she hoped to address it. So the third thing was then she developed her educational innovation. And so she, in conjunction with 4 other mentors, so you'll see this, there's going to be this theme of mentorship that's extremely important for medical education, but she found mentors in the 4 different clerkships of OB-GYN, pediatrics, medicine, and surgery to help her build case-based global health didactics. And again, because they're in 4 different clerkships, she was able to essentially introduce them longitudinally throughout the year. This one's important. I learned this early on, but she studied it. So she did pre and post surveys of all the students in this curriculum. And then what was even more impressive is that she actually wrote it up. So she took it from an initial idea all the way to writing it up as their Scholars in Medicine project. So I think for the SIM projects, for the HMS 4th year students, doing a medical education project is absolutely valid, and it can be very successful if you put the work in. And so even beyond submitting this as their SIM project, she actually published it in MedEd Portal, which is a wonderful place to publish. I know in this series, I think Dr. Smink is going to actually mention strategies on publishing your medical education work. That comes up after Dr. Bates and Dr. Alexander's talks. But MedEd Portal is a wonderful place. They focus on curricular designs that also have a scholar component. So Parisa published here, and now her curriculum is freely available to any other medical educator looking to introduce a global health curriculum at their site, and it has the actual survey data as well. So very, very impressive work. I think following this blueprint, honestly, that Parisa figured out herself is a great way for students to innovate within their medical schools. So let me pause there. I'm about to go to my next case. Christina, do we have any comments from our group here?
Not right now.
All right. So again, as I go, please feel free to pause and put something in the chat. We'll call on you, and we'll continue to have a discussion here. Okay. So let's continue the case. All right. So now he's 28. He still is holding on strong to his Wisconsin sports teams. Again, that's where he's from. But he has a stronger interest in medical education. And now in his junior year of internal medicine residency at Brigham. So the case evolves. So this brings me to my second strategy, which is practice your skills. And my approach was, as a resident, I forced myself to teach in some form every day. And this varied. So when I was an intern, what that meant was I would really try to go out of my way to teach the medical student on this service. I think it's easier to teach to the level that you just emerged from. And so I found that making a commitment to admitting a patient with myself as the intern was a way that I could feel like I was doing some teaching every day. And then again, it varied because as an intern, I felt I was primarily working with the medical student, but as a resident, then you're responsible for the intern and the medical student as well. And I want to show you this really fun picture from when I was on the intensive teaching unit, and you can see there's some real stars here. The Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, and Bill Taylor, who's one of our master clinicians. I like to call him Coach. He is an incredible educator who actually has this initiative for those at the Brigham, where he will come and observe your teaching and give you feedback on that. And then also Andrew Sin, who was a good friend from medical school, and we were co-residents together. So what me and Andrew did was every day we, in the intensive teaching unit, the resident alternates in terms of who's leading rounds, but we committed to teaching 5 minutes at the start of rounds every single day. And what we found was this was the way to do it, because if we tried to wait for the end of rounds to teach, everyone was too tired. They wanted to go and start their work, and it felt like we were holding them back. And then if we tried to push it off until afternoon, everyone was too busy. So we made this commitment to teach up front 5 minutes. And honestly, it's a strategy I still use today when I'm on the consult service with the GI fellows, or if we're in clinic. I see Ann is there. I like to teach right in the beginning, because then you can check that box off. It's so fun to teach, but oftentimes I think it does get pushed to the side because we get so busy clinically. So make an emphasis to teach up front. That's what I learned as a resident. It's something I still do today. So as a resident, my approach was also to seek out formal teaching. So again, there's the ward-based teaching, but also there were opportunities to teach more formally in through various opportunities. So one was intern report, where you present a case and walk interns through a certain topic. There's also the teaching resident rotation as a senior resident, where you end up doing some formal teaching with students as well as morning reports. And for today, I think it's similar in that there's ward-based teaching, but I think increasingly so we are having residents participate in clerkship didactics. So if you're a resident interested in medical education, reach out to the clerkship leadership team in whatever field you're in. There may be an opportunity to teach there. And then the clinical skills courses, I've mentioned the practice of medicine course, the clinical skills course for the first year students in the pathways at HMS. Great opportunity to teach. And it's now a more formal thing. This is something that Mary really spearheaded when we worked together, called the Practice of Medicine Core Educator Team. And so the expectation here is that you teach at least 3 times a year. And then it's great because you end up getting to know the students a bit better, and you also work within this team and you get direct observation from the faculty. So another way to get more experience as a resident. So let's see, Christina, any comments here?
Yeah, actually, we have a great comment from Anika. She's curious if you can talk a little bit about what you look for in a mentor. Is it someone you learn how to teach from? Is it someone who connects you to more teaching opportunities? Does this person have to be in their specialty? I think these are great questions.
Fantastic. So that Annika Law is actually my stellar wife. So thank you for that comment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to defer. We're going to talk about mentorship a little later in the talk, and I will make sure to hit all those points. If not, we can talk about them more when we all get home later this evening. But let's come to that later in the talk. Okay. All right. So we'll keep going here. So we're now at 30 years old. And at this point, growing affection for Massachusetts. I've been here for a while since undergrad, med school. You can see there's a trend of me not actually leaving the institution. And now it's clear, though. Now it's clear that I have a career interest in medical education. And I've graduated residency, and we're about to, my wife and I, take this gap year between finishing residency and starting fellowship. Myself in GI at the Brigham, my wife in pulmonary and critical care at the BEI and MGH. So this leads me to my next strategy, which is to say yes. And I want to say this is true, especially early on. So this was when Dr. Alexander, at that time, it's been very hard to call Dr. Alexander by his first name for me. I'm slowly getting used to it. But in any case, Dr. Alexander presented this opportunity for me to co-direct the Patient Doctor 2 course at the Brigham. And to be honest, I was very nervous about the idea of me co-directing a major longitudinal course within the HMS curriculum. I had no course administration experience before. I had taught a lot, and I do think the work I started as a fourth-year student up and through residency prepared me for this time. I'm sure Eric felt the same, that I was ready for it, but I'll be honest, I was nervous about it. But I am so glad I took it on, because through that experience, I learned how a course is administered. It was honestly the most significant teaching experience I had to date. By being in this role, I got to teach in various formats, small group, large group, at the bedside. So I gained a lot of teaching experience that way. And potentially most importantly, it helped me join this community of medical educators. I was definitely the youngest one at the table, but and honestly, like, everyone else were amazing teachers who taught me just a few years back as a student. But taking that leap, saying yes when the opportunity especially is big, is a great strategy, and it will challenge you to take on roles that you have less experience in, but it's those challenges that you gain all these benefits I just mentioned and sets you up down the road. And importantly, as I mentioned, this was supposed to be a gap year where we had all this flexibility. My wife and I worked as nocturnists, so we had time in between shifts, and we had all these big plans to travel, but we still found time to travel. And so here is a picture of a group of penguins that we met in Argentina. This is the southernmost tip of Argentina in Ushuaia. And so we still found a way. And so I think what I'm trying to say with this penguin picture is you will find a way. When there's a big opportunity in your career, I really think you should go for it. And then you figure everything out. You figure the rest out. And so we figured it out in a way that we still got to enjoy traveling while I got this amazing experience helping to co-direct a course with Fidencio Saldana, who ended up being a great mentor as well.
Yeah, we actually have Martin chimed in, and Martin, I pinged you, so thank you for that. By the way, Martin has given me mentorship, so it is okay for me to reach out and ask him. Not that that matters. I would point out, though, the advantages, Martin says, of cross-discipline perspectives, right? In education, getting that mentor from general education or the world is perspective enhancing, but sometimes we stick to our little bubble, right? And getting outside our bubble can be really helpful. And if I could just also tack on, we can't get all the mentoring we need from any one person. We have to embrace multiple mentors who can give us multiple insights on what we need to move our careers forward.
That's wonderful. Thank you for those comments. So the case continues, now 32, clearly established in Massachusetts. I'm in the middle of my GI fellowship. And now I have a desire, like, I'm learning my clinical trade. I'm learning how to be a gastroenterologist, but I also want to keep working on my medical education skills. So this brings me to my fourth strategy for getting involved in medical education. That's to take on formal roles. For me, it was at HMS and Brigham. Again, for those outside of the institution, it's doing it at your home institution and home medical school. So what this looked like was essentially, I learned this term from my mentors, which is building an educational portfolio. And I focused on getting a diversity of teaching experiences because I felt like that would really advance my skills as an educator. So there was the clinical skills box, and that was fulfilled by being a preceptor in the practice of medicine course, and also in the introduction to clinical skills course. I see Dr. Daniel Solomon is on. He helps direct that course, both wonderful courses through the 2 different pathways of HMS in a way to really develop your skills at the bedside while also getting a longitudinal experience with a group of students, which is really wonderful. So that was the clinical skills piece. I also wanted to develop my classroom-based teaching. So I serve as a tutorial leader in the GI Pathophysiology courses, which have since evolved. The HST course remains the same, but the pathways course, new pathways course has changed. I think I was a tutorial leader in Dr. Shields' last year for that course, but that was a wonderful experience. Really, really challenging to take a small group of 6 to 8 students through a case, making sure that you hit on all the key concepts while focusing on it and it being a student-led initiative. Very challenging. I think I learned so much from those experiences, and it's so different than teaching at the bedside. So that was really great to get a different set of skills. And then also, as you can see, I've focused on undergraduate medical education, but I also thought it was important to get some graduate medical education experience. So I did a few lectures for the ambulatory residents on their for the residents on their ambulatory rotation in the Brigham IM, and so that was teaching GI topics. So as you can see, there's various, when you're taking on formal roles, my personal strategy is to spread yourself out. So, and perhaps you're not doing this all in the same year, but 1 year or for the first couple of years, you focus on clinical skills and then you shift to another area. So as a whole, you develop this whole plethora of skills that you can then apply as an educator. And one good tip that I got early on was to save the student evaluations for each teaching experience. This will come up when Dr. Bates comes and talks about promotion, but for those of us who are in the education and leadership track at HMS, that's actually a component of promotion, is having evaluations that you can share with the promotions committee. And so I got this advice early on, and now I do it every time I have evaluations come in. I put it in a folder in the course that I taught, and then it's there for me, ready to go for when I need to share that.
Yes, we actually have a really strong comment from Francesco. Let me find that. He says that many of his learners find it hard to get started. They're worried that they don't know enough, maybe have some anxiety about, do I belong in medical education? Should I be exploring this? How can they feel confident starting? What is your advice to them on when to start and how to feel good about doing so?
Yeah, that's great. I think, I mean, as I said, I can't remember. I think it was maybe it was my first strategy, which is it was early and often. So I think the idea of finding mentorship is absolutely something you should seek out early in your career. I'll talk about this a little bit more later in the talk. But again, when I first started, I didn't truly understand how much a mentor can influence your career path. I have found that mentorship is arguably the most important component of becoming a successful educator. It's probably true for any path that you take. So I would say seek out early and often. And the BEI, we can actually help with this, where we have a network of mentors at the ready to meet. And so it doesn't just have to be someone that you've met before. We'll talk about this in just a bit, but we can help with that. So thank you, Francesco. All right. So moving along, now 34, we're approaching the point where I've actually lived in Massachusetts longer than I have with my home state of Wisconsin. And now I've finished GI fellowship, and I'm looking to really solidify medical education as a part of something I do formally as a new junior faculty member at the Brigham. Oh, yes. So I thought I had saved all my Brigham IDs. I really thought I did, but I couldn't find some of the gaps, like the resident and GI. But here we go. This is, you can see the evolution. And to be honest, I would argue there's not that much change, but this is about 12 years in the making between student to faculty member. So 5th tip, be scholarly. This is an important one. So, and now we talk about mentorship. mentorship is incredibly useful. It will push you and challenge you and get you to the next level. And I really think add meaning to whatever you are pursuing. So finding a mentor can be done locally. I'll say for myself, as a gastroenterologist, there was one clear education mentor in Helen Shields, who has been one of the leaders in this area, and Molly Perensovich, who was my fellowship program director. But outside of Helen and Molly, there weren't many people at all doing medical education in my division. Fortunately, I had these great relationships from before with Eric, and then developed a relationship with Nora Osman in the Department of Medicine. And honestly, Eric and Nora have been really my primary mentors within education. And so it just goes to say, I saw Ariel here. There are subspecialists interested in education, and you may find that you don't have a logical mentor within your own division. But don't be confined to working within your division. Look outside. You may find your best mentors are actually outside of where you work clinically. The second piece is that your mentor doesn't necessarily need to be at your home institution. You can make your own connections. I think it's just natural for our community of educators that we love mentorship, and mentors I think almost always will be very favorable about being approached. I had this really unique situation where I wanted to do a GI research project on teaching. What are the actual best practices of teaching endoscopy? But I didn't have like an obvious mentor to do it locally. There was someone I was reading about. I was reading his articles at UCSF, who did a lot of research on cognitive load theory, and this idea that when you're teaching a procedure, your trainee can be overloaded with the simple fact of trying to maneuver all the different handles of the scope, that it can be actually very challenging to teach. And so I reached out to him just via email, never met him, and said, I had this idea, would you be able to help me with this? And he was so supportive, and we had a really successful connection from the get-go, had a very nice project we put together, and now we're working on several other projects together. So that just goes to show that taking initiative, the worst thing that can happen is that you don't hear back. But I think, again, with this community of medical educators, we tend to like to help each other. And so you'll find that you can find a mentor outside your institution as well. So with that mentor, I would encourage you all to not only teach, but also try to publish. It's hard. It's getting harder to publish in medical education. But with an excellent mentor, it's something that we all can do. And as part of that, as part of getting this, repertoire of skills that will set you up to be able to publish, I encourage all of us to seek additional training in medical education. And so there's several different ways we can do that. And the BEI is home to a lot of great programs. So there's the BEI and Prize Medical Education Research Series. There's the Take the Next Step series, which focuses more on career development. And then the Global Med Cafe that Dr. Shiba Ramani helps lead, about teaching and learning amongst the global community. So just staying, up to date with all the BEI offerings and attending these various talks is one great way to gain skills. The Department of Medicine at the Brigham has two fantastic programs. The Prize program, with Dr. Ramani helps lead, and the SIRS program, which I was fortunate enough to be a scholar early in my career. The SIRS stands for Clinical Education Research Scholars Program. It's really unique. It protects 25% of your time for over 2 years to exclusively do medical education research and get medical education research training. So it's a phenomenal program. Maybe Dr. Ramani at the break, we could speak about her initiatives here, but usually the call for applications comes out in the late spring, early summer. So that's definitely something to look out for. And I know Dr. Alexander is going to talk about funding for medical education in a subsequent talk. So we'll hear more about that in the future. The third big category here that I want to talk about is the HMS Academy. They offer grand rounds, workshops on very really important but specific skills in medical education. And then they also offer the medical education fellowships, one by Dr. David Hirsch, who's an awesome educator, and the other by Dr. Amy Sullivan, who actually is a real expert in qualitative research. So another opportunity to advance your skills. And lastly, the Harvard-Macy Institute has several offerings. I think the one that most clinicians do is the Program for Educators in Health Professions. I did it back when I was a Cert Scholar. And again, I think there's this piece of gaining skills, but there's this other even more, arguably more important piece, which is finding your people and becoming part of this community of educators that the Harvard-Macy does so well. So I want to take a break there because I think it would be nice to hear from the audience, especially anyone who has done any of these programs, if Dr. Amani is available to talk about her programs as well. Christine, do you mind helping moderate that portion?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have any comments yet about these programs, but I will say that Ed had a great comment talking about imposter phenomenon and how it can affect people at different levels and different activities, and that if you have this sort of growth mindset and you're ready to teach and innovate, that you can do so. You just have to have that forward-thinking mentality. And I think part of that forward-thinking mentality ties into going for these faculty development programs, whether you choose to try to be in one that is sort of free and smaller, or one that takes a little more time and investment. Even taking a little step here, I think, is going to go a long way. And I'm somebody who has benefited from some of these programs as well.
Awesome. All
Hey,
right.
Navin.
Yes, thank you, Shubha. Yes.
Sorry, I'm in clinic and in 5 minutes, I'm supposed to start teaching my residents, but at another time, Eric, Christina, Navin, I'd be happy to talk about mentoring in general, Harvard-Macy in general, the PRIZE program, and the SIRS and international medical education organizations as well. I'm trying to do double duty.
Thank you. Thank you for being so active in the chat box with all the references too. So wonderful. So we'll have Shubha come back and share all her wealth of knowledge as well as experience leading a lot of these initiatives. All right, so we're on to my sixth strategy, which is to innovate and share. And this is like Christina DeZara's wheelhouse. So I'm going to try to do my best, but Christina's a real expert here. So medical education has changed a lot over the past 10 years. I mean, so much so even since I was a student. And I think it's really our duty to our learners that we all learn and become accustomed and acquainted and experienced with these new methods of teaching. And one of the newest ways to teach and be involved in medical education is Med Twitter. Med Twitter offers a lot of opportunities for you to not only share your resources, but also, again, connect with this community that's bigger than wherever you are in your own institution. So some examples of what you can do on Twitter. You can post a teaching infographic. So let's say you give a teaching, you do a didactic for your students or your residents, and there's a diagram on there that you made that kind of summarizes some key clinical concepts. You can put that on Twitter and share it with the rest of Med Twitter by just adding that hashtag. Another example is the 1-minute teaching tip that the BEI is doing with Christina. And so here's Mary Montgomery, an awesome educator in the DOM, who co-directs the POM course currently with Robert Stern, another excellent educator. And so this 1-minute teaching tip is a really cool initiative that honestly is getting a lot of traction on Twitter and is a way for you, if you are willing to participate, a way for you to get yourself out there on Twitter and share your teaching tips. So for Mary, it was about using stories, basing clinical teaching on stories. It's easy to learn, easy to remember stories. And so that's a strategy Mary does. And we have a really cool website through the BEI that actually houses all these teaching tips so you can see them all together. So another way to educate on Twitter is a tweetorial. So what is a tweetorial? So essentially a tweetorial is a series of tweets that are tweeted in succession that walk you through a teaching topic. So I would say baby number two had some time to do some tutorials, and so here's one of them. And so I was teaching about small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. And in putting together a tutorial, I really think it actually challenges you to be a better teacher, because you have to be concise and you have to be logical. And you will find that if you do a tutorial, it will likely improve the way you teach when you're back in person teaching a learner right next to you. So, for example, here's what I did. So, first tweet: the colon is full of bacteria. The small intestine should not be. So when bacteria start occurring, proliferating in the small intestine, that can cause some issues. So why? So that leads to the next tweet. Let's identify these processes. So one is the bacteria now in the small intestine are breaking down what otherwise would have been completely absorbed. In that process of breakdown, they release gas. That gas leads to bloating, cramping, distension. And then you can also add some comedy. I think I mentioned the dreaded flatulence. Okay, so there's the third tweet in the line of tutorials, and then that leads to my next tweet, which is bacteria. These in the small intestine, they actually line the mucosa. If you line the mucosa, you can't absorb as well. That leads to diarrhea. So you can see, you follow this logical fashion. Your learners, the Med Twitter community, can learn about a topic in a very short amount of time and really learn the key points of that topic. And again, I really do think it makes you a better teacher. It makes your teaching more concise, more efficient. Twitter, also another way to share your medical education research. If you following these strategies, you find a mentor, you innovate, and you publish. Great way to disseminate your work. You can choose a figure that you want to share from your medical education research. You could even do a tutorial on your own research. So another great way to spread the news of your own work. And again, any questions, we're lucky enough to have a real expert in this area with Christina Dezara, who I'm sure is always available to answer questions. Email, that's her Twitter handle that you could tweet directly at for more guidance. Podcasts. I think podcasts are another big development in medical education that as educators we need to be aware of, and I would encourage us to become involved in as well. So my first opportunity was as a discussant when I was a fellow, and similar to when Eric asked me to co-direct the PD2 course at the Brigham, I felt when I was asked to be a discussant, I had some of this imposter syndrome that Ed came up. I was nervous. I felt like I'm just a fellow. How can I be an expert? How can I weigh in on something that's going to be broadcast for anyone who has access to the podcast? It was for the NEJM 360 series. But as I mentioned before, saying yes and going for these big opportunities, I think is really important. So I went for it. I learned so much about the topic that I ended up discussing, and I gained confidence in my own ability to do a podcast and to share my own, quote unquote expert opinion with other learners. So I think the first step is when, if you're asked to be a discussant is to honestly go for it. And if you have any reservations, we can help. So we have a BEI podcast consult service now with me and Caitlin DePaula, who really knows so much about putting podcasts together, especially the technological side. So if you have this opportunity to do a podcast, please reach out to us. We can help with thinking about how are you going to design the podcast. If you happen to be invited to be a discussant on a podcast, we can help you with thinking about the script, making sure you're prepared for your podcast. So utilize these resources. I think a big part of this is that we have so many resources. And it's just a matter of knowing that they're out there and then seeking them out. So this is one that I want you all to know about as podcasts become a bigger part of how we learn. I also want to mention Run the List, which is a medical education podcast I've been involved in, which has really, really grown. It started with just a conversation between me and Walker Red, who's a third-year senior resident at the Brigham, in the Faulkner cafeteria, where I was just mentioning that I think we should have a podcast designed for medical students. This was about, over 2 years ago, almost 3 years. And there were some big podcasts out there, but none were designed for medical students. So then Walker happened to be on the ITU with Emily, who was an HMS student. And Emily, Walker, and I started out putting together this Run the List podcast. Then Joyce and Blake joined on. and really took us to the next level. I see Sarah Honorado is on, and she was an amazing script writer. So we built this team essentially of individuals interested in medical education, but who also, I think, we're fully aware of where we're going with learning and understanding the value of podcasts. And so we've been very fortunate, thanks to our team, to have a lot of success with the medical education podcast. And, part of that success was finding funding. And we did have a Help Me grant from the BEI to help us kind of go to the next level. And now we're growing. You can see we have over 50 episodes. Where we should have an exciting collaboration to report in the coming weeks, where we can really take this to the next level. But I think two things here. One is, again, this is an example of getting to know the existing climate of medical education, and two is jumping in there. And then three is honestly is the team. And I really think the reason we've had success is because of the amazing residents and students who've worked on this. Very, very lucky to be a part of this. All right, we got about 15 minutes left. Last tip, and that's find your people. And what I mean by that is find a committee. There are many medical education committees that you can join where, first and foremost, again, I'm always talking about community. You find your community of medical educators this way. But two is you take on a formal role and you learn about whatever that committee is focused on. So locally, there's the BEI and Brigham E-Coat, which is a great way to learn about education, both at the UME level and the GME level here at the Brigham. And then there's several HMS standing committees. I just got an email a couple of days ago about it, where you can also join and be a part of a committee that works on medical education for the undergraduates, for the medical students. I'd also encourage you to find a society nationally to become a part of. I'm a general gastroenterologist who loves medical education, but I don't have a clinical area of interest. The reason I like general GI is that we get to see everything. So what I found was when I would go to my national meetings, I felt like I didn't really have a place. I kind of like wander through some of the clinical topics, but I didn't really have a home there until I found that one of the clinical societies actually had an educator community, an education committee. So this was, for me, was American Gastroenterological Association's Academy of Educators. So by finding them and becoming part of that committee, again, I found my community, I found my people, but then I'm actually now making connections nationally with individuals who are doing medical education within my own field of GI. And that's leading to research opportunities, presentation opportunities, and honestly gives me a reason to go to these national meetings. So that was really important for me. And I would encourage you, again, we're going to talk about promotion with Dr. Bates's talk, but if that also motivates you, it's very important to have a reputation outside of your own institution, and doing committee work is a way that you can develop relationships with individuals outside of your home institution as well. So a lot of great reasons to do committee work. Excellent. All right. So I'm going to summarize now. Christina, is there any comments from the group that we? Yeah,
we have Ed and Shuba, and they're both saying, when things go back to normal, or even if it's online, get yourself to an AAMC meeting, get yourself to an AMEE meeting, a national meeting about medical and health professions education beyond the specialty to really expand your networks. And, I've been to the AAMC. I aspire to go to the AMEE one year, but I will tell you that people are generally nice, and it's a really great way. Just get out of your comfort zone, talk to people, meet people, present a poster, do something if you can, and embrace that opportunity to spend a few days just really enjoying yourself, getting to know people, and finding others that love what you love.
I think that's wonderful. I mean, a lot of times I meet with students, they ask me why I went into GI, and I say, because honestly, I found my people. Like, these are the people that I felt like we're the same personality, we like the same things. But I think that's so true for education as well. And if you can find that at the national level or international level and education meeting, even better. So excellent. So let's summarize here. So just to review the 7 strategies, 1 was to start early and often, even as a student. 2 was to practice your skills in roles both at the medical school as well as in the hospital. 3 was say yes, and I put an asterisk because I honestly think when I was an early faculty member, I got some conflicting advice. I think there was a lot of advice that actually said to say no and to not take on too much. But I think when you're early, you do have to, I think early in your career is when you say yes. And as you move through your career, you become more strategic. So now I'm in my 4th year, and as Eric knows, I've become a bit more strategic about where I want to focus and what kind of experiences I want to spend my time on. But I think early on you say yes and you get more experience, you get your community to know who you are, you take on formal roles, and then you build your reputation as an educator. And there we go, formal roles. And remember that part, I talked about diversifying your experiences so that you're working on different skill sets. Remember, save those the learner evaluations so you have that as part of your portfolio. Be scholarly, and the key part here is finding a mentor or multiple mentors to do your education work. Innovate and share. We got to be up with the times. And I'm generally a slow adopter. Like I meant to mention this earlier. Facebook literally was born in my dorm with my wife at Harvard. Mark Zuckerberg lived in our dorm like a few entryways away, but it still took me years to join Facebook. The same thing with Twitter. It took me a while until I met with Christina and she showed me what you can do. So I think we should just be more apt to adopt these new methods and kind of challenge ourselves to learn and share in new ways. And lastly, find your people with the committee-based work. The support system is really, really important. So thank you all.
Just want to take a moment again. Navin, super job. Thank you so much. And it was probably one of the most active chat box discussions I've ever been a part of as well. So it was a very active hour and really enjoyed that a lot. With that, I wish everyone a great afternoon ahead. And again, thanks so much, Navin.